Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that might sound a bit academic on the surface, but honestly, it's probably the most critical foundation for understanding modern AI. We're going behind the scenes, really pulling back the curtain on what you could call the semantic backbone, or maybe the hidden blueprint, that's actually powering some of the most sophisticated AI systems out there. We're talking knowledge graphs, advanced search, the works.
Yeah, the really complex stuff.
Exactly. We are diving deep into ontologies. And look, this isn't just, throwing around technical jargon. This is about the core logic, the structure that lets machines actually understand the world, to get beyond just matching patterns.
Right, to get to that contextual comprehension.
Precisely.
And that context, that comprehension is just, it's everything now, especially in the, let's say, 2022 to 2025 period we're seeing. So our mission today for you listening is to get you up to speed, quickly but thoroughly. What are ontologies? Why are they suddenly so indispensable?
Yeah, why now?
Exactly. And crucially, how do they mesh with all the fast-moving tech like large language models, LLMs? We want to give you that shortcut, basically, to being genuinely well-informed on knowledge representation, so you understand the architecture under the AI hood.
And the context for why this is so vital now is key, isn't it? We're just generating unbelievable amounts of data.
Oh, absolutely. Exponential growth.
And the demands on machine learning, on knowledge graphs, NLP, they're exploding too. And systems built purely on statistical correlations, well, they're starting to show their limits, right? They kind of break down.
They hit a wall, yeah. They lack that deeper understanding.
So if you want AI that's robust, that's reliable, maybe even accountable, which is pretty much what every company wants now, you absolutely need solid, formal knowledge representation.
No way around it.
And that means understanding ontologies. They're the essential discipline that brings order to the chaos for a computer, turns it into coherence.
Okay, so let's nail down the definition first, because the precision here really matters. In AI, in computer science, an ontology is formally defined as a formal and explicit representation of knowledge.
Formal and explicit.
All right. And it's not just dumping data. It's a carefully curated set of concepts. We call these classes. Then you have specific things, the entities or individuals. Then properties describing them, and critically, the formal, logical relations between all those things, all within a specific defined domain.
Right, like medicine or finance.
Exactly. So put simply, an ontology spells out in a way a machine can actually process what exists in that specific area and how all the pieces are connected and, importantly, constrained by rules.
So it's much more than just like a database schema. It sounds more like a conceptual map, almost philosophical, but written in logic that a machine gets.
That's a great way to put it. A conceptual map rendered in logic. And that hits the machine comprehension angle directly. Why is this explicit structure so vital?
Yeah, why bother with all that formality?
Because it imposes that structural discipline we talked about.
Yeah.
Think about it. Human language is just full of ambiguity, right? Context changes everything.
Totally. The same word means different things.
Exactly. But if you explicitly define in the ontology that, say, a car is a subclass of a vehicle, and every vehicle must have a driver, you remove that ambiguity for the machine. It's clear.
Okay.
Ontologies provide this semantic, structured knowledge that algorithms can directly process. They're really crucial if you're aiming for AI that's more robust, more contextualized. They give you that base terminology, that semantic framework you need to really boost the results you get from ML and NLP.
Okay, so here's maybe the aha moment for people listening.
Yeah.
We hear about AI's problems, bias, hallucinations, lack of common sense. How exactly do ontologies help fix those?
They provide the anchors and the rules.
Wow.
Without that formal semantic backbone, AI systems, especially the purely statistical ones, they really struggle. They get tripped up by basic ambiguity like, does bank mean the side of a river or a financial place? They can't do complex logical inference reliably. They can't deduce that if A implies B and B implies C, then A must imply C unless you've formally defined that relationship, that transitivity.
Okay, so they can't reason logically without the rules being spelled out.
Precisely. And, critically, they often can't explain why they made a decision. They can't provide transparent, auditable explanations. Ontologies impose the structure needed to tackle all three issues.
How so?
Well, they clarify context in NLP, reducing ambiguity. They enable robust reasoning by defining those explicit rules and logic the axioms will get to. They support explainability by providing that logical structure to trace decisions back. And they're essential for making different systems work together. interoperability. They force the machine to deal with context and structure, not just crunching raw data points. Hashtag Tag Bronco 1.2, the building blocks of knowledge representation.
Okay, that makes sense. So to really get how it works, we need to break down the parts, right? Like, what are the actual building blocks an engineer uses to construct this knowledge map?
Exactly. There are 5 core components you really need to grasp. First up, the most basic, classes.
Okay, classes.
Like categories. Yep, categories, concepts. They're the abstractions that group similar individuals together. Think of them as the types of things in your domain, like vehicle or animal or person.
Yeah.
These general concepts give your domain its basic structure.
Got it. And then you have the specific examples of those classes.
Right. Those are the individuals, or sometimes called instances. These are the concrete real-world things. If vehicle is your class, then, that specific Tesla Model 3 sitting in your driveway with its unique VIN number, that's an individual.
Or Alice or me or you were individuals of the class person.
Precisely. The ontology sets the general types, and then the knowledge graph, which we'll differentiate in a sec, gets filled with all these specific individuals.
Okay, classes, individuals, what connects them or describes them?
That's where properties come in. They define the characteristics of classes and, crucially, how they relate to each other. They basically break down into 2 types. You've got attributes, which describe a single individual, like a vehicle has wheels, maybe the value is 4, or a person has height. Simple characteristics.
Right.
But then you have the really powerful ones, the relations that connect 2 or more individuals, like a person is friend of another person, or a company owns a particular asset. These relations are the actual links that form the structure of the graph.
Okay, this is starting to sound like more than just categories. This is where the real logic starts to come in, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the next building block. Axioms.
Axioms are absolutely fundamental for the formal reasoning part. These are statements that are taken as formally true, as binding, within the specific domain of that ontology.
So like ground rules.
Exactly. Ground rules are fundamental truths. They're essential because they restrict meaning, they enforce consistency across the whole structure, and they define the logical backbone. A classic example is an axiom like, all humans are mammals. Or maybe defining a property, like the property has parent is transitive.
Why is that so important for the machine, though? How does it use a rule like, all humans are mammals?
Because without these explicit rules, the machine could potentially generate contradictions or make nonsensical inferences. An axiom ensures logical consistency. If you state all humans are mammals, the machine can't later assert that a specific human individual is, say, a reptile without flagging a contradiction.
Ah, okay. It prevents logical errors.
Precisely. They act like guards against logical nonsense. They maintain consistency, and they enable the kind of deductive reasoning, the inference, that makes ontology so powerful for AI. They stop the AI from stating things that are logically impossible, according to the definitions you've set for that domain.
Makes sense. Okay, so we have classes, individuals, properties, axioms. How is all this organized? It sounds like it could get messy fast.
That's the final piece, hierarchies. These organize the classes into taxonomies. Think of a family tree structure, but for concepts. They use subclass, superclass relationships, the classic is-a or type of relation.
Like saying a car is a type of vehicle.
Exactly. And the immediate win here is efficiency, specifically through inheritance. When you define car as a subclass of vehicle, the notation is usually k-taller subset vehicle. The car class automatically inherits all the properties and axioms you already defined for the parent vehicle class.
Oh, I see. So you don't have to redefine everything.
Right. If you've already stated that all vehicles must have a VIN number, you don't need to repeat that rule for cars and trucks and motorcycles and every other type of vehicle you define later. It inherits it. This nesting, this hierarchical structure, is what makes building and managing large, complex ontologies actually feasible.
Okay, this is a really important point because you hear these terms thrown around a lot, often together, sometimes interchangeably, especially when they're talking about, Google search or Alexa's. Ontology and knowledge graph. Our sources are clear they're not the same thing, right?
Not at all the same, but they are deeply connected, yeah. It's a key point of confusion we need to clear up. It's about the architecture.
So how do we distinguish them?
Think of the ontology as the schema, the grammar, the logic. Its main job is defining the abstract framework. It sets the rules. What classes exist, what properties they can have, how they relate, what the axioms or constraints are. It's generally more static. It defines the vocabulary and the structure you'll use to talk about the domain.
Yeah.
But it usually contains very little, or maybe even no specific factual data itself.
Okay, so the ontology is the empty blueprint, the set of rules. Then the knowledge graph is the building filled with actual stuff.
That's a perfect analogy. The KG is the dynamic instantiation. It's populated with concrete, specific data points. It holds the millions or billions of specific individuals, Alice, that specific Tesla, that particular financial transaction, and contains the factual relations between them, usually stored as triples: subject, predicate, object.
Like Alice's friend of Bob.
Exactly. KDs are dynamic. They're constantly being updated with new real-world information. But this is the crucial link. They must follow the rules, the structure laid out by the ontology.
So what's the big advantage of keeping them separate? Why not just bundle the rules and the data together in one big thing?
Separation gives you flexibility and stability.
Right.
The ontology, the rule set, can be carefully designed, validated for logical consistency, and remain relatively stable. If, say, a new type of financial product is invented, you update the ontology schema once, carefully.
Right.
The knowledge graph, though, can ingest millions of new transaction data points per second, potentially, without needing to revalidate the entire underlying logical structure every time. It just has to conform to the existing rules.
Okay, that makes sense for scale.
Totally.
Yeah.
It makes the whole system more scalable. Inference, the reasoning part, can often be faster because the rules are predefined in the ontology. And it makes maintenance easier because the data teams and the ontology engineers can work somewhat independently, updating their respective parts. They absolutely need each other, though. The ontology provides the meaning, the model, the inference rules. The KG organizes, stores, and connects the actual facts according to that model.
And together, they're the engine behind so much of the smart tech we use, right? The way Google understands your search isn't just keywords, or how Siri or Alexa can answer complex questions. They need both that structured data and the framework to interpret what it all means.
Precisely. It's the combination that delivers the intelligence.
Okay, so we know what an ontology is. It's building blocks, how it relates to a KG. Now let's talk scope. Because I imagine an ontology trying to describe, like, everything in the universe is going to be very different from one that just describes the parts inside a specific jet engine.
Absolutely. They're classified based on that breadth or narrowness of focus. And choosing the right scope is a critical strategic decision. Hashtag tag 2.1 classifications based on scope. We can generally break them down into three main types. Understanding the difference and when to choose which really dictates how well your system will perform, how it integrates, and what problems it can actually solve. First, and probably the most common you'll encounter, is the domain ontology.
Okay, domain. So focused on one specific area, one niche.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It represents knowledge for a particular field. Could be medicine, could be software engineering, could be the rules of chess or the classification of different types of wine. The power here is its specificity. It eliminates ambiguity within that specific context.
Like your example of beam.
Right. In a construction ontology, beam means a structural support. In an ontology about lasers, beam means a focused stream of light. Very different meanings, clearly defined within their respective domains.
And the sources mention the word card, too.
Yeah, another great example. If you're building an ontology for poker, card means a playing card. Simple. But switch to a computer hardware domain, and card suddenly means a video card or a network interface card. The domain ontology locked down that meaning specifically for its limited world.
Okay, so that's hyper-specific. What's the opposite end of the spectrum?
That would be the upper ontology, sometimes called a foundation ontology. This tries to model universal fundamental concepts, things that apply across all domains, like time, space, object, process, event, quality, quantity. Really basic abstract building blocks of reality. The main goal here is standardization and interoperability on a massive scale.
How does that help interoperability?
Well, imagine two different teams building domain ontologies independently. Maybe one for clinical drug trials, another for pharmaceutical manufacturing supply chains. They might define process or location in slightly different incompatible ways.
Right, semantic clashes.
Exactly. Trying to merge those later, manually fusing the semantics, is incredibly difficult and expensive. But if both teams built their domain ontologies by extending a common upper ontology, like, say, basic formal ontology, BFO or SUMO, they already share a standardized universal definition for those core concepts. It makes integration vastly easier and promotes reuse.
So domain is specific, upper is universal. Is there something in between?
Yes. And it's often the most practical approach, especially in large organizations. That's the hybrid ontology.
Just mixing them.
Pretty much. It pragmatically combines the stable general structure from an upper ontology, like using BFO's definition of object and process, and then integrates it with the specific terms and detailed relationships from one or more domain ontologies relevant to the task.
So best of both worlds.
Kind of. You get the broad interoperability foundation from the upper level, but you retain the necessary detail and specificity from the domain level. Gellish is often pointed to as an example of this kind of blended pragmatic strategy. Hashtag 2.2, the role of core ontologies.
Interesting. Now, beyond that main three-way split domain, upper, hybrid, the sources mentioned another category that seems really relevant, especially for complex science and modeling projects, the core ontology. It sounds like it sits somewhere between domain and upper.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. A core ontology aims to capture the fundamental concepts that are central to a particular area of interest. It's broader than a single narrow domain, but it's less universal and often less philosophically heavy-handed than a full upper ontology.
Why would you choose that? Why not just use an upper ontology?
Often, it's pragmatism. Developers might find existing upper ontologies like BFO are just too generic for their specific needs. Or maybe the philosophical commitments baked into an upper ontology don't quite align with their scientific perspective or modeling goals. They need something more tailored, but still abstract enough to connect several related domains.
And we have a concrete example, ODO-IM, the ontology of descriptions and observations for integrated modeling.
Yes, ODO-IM is fascinating. It's a key piece of the KLA integrated modeling software, which is heavily used in environmental science and sustainability studies. Its purpose is very targeted, to capture and integrate diverse scientific data observations, models, data sets with a strong emphasis on provenance.
Provenance meaning where the data came from, who did what, when.
Exactly. Who made the observation, using what method, under what conditions. Its structure is really revealing because it boils things down to the essentials needed for trustworthy scientific modeling. It's organized around just three core categories: description, observable, and predicate.
Okay, let's unpack those. Observable, predicate, description. Why those three?
They map directly to the scientific process. The observable is the thing in the world you're actually measuring or observing, say, air temperature or soil moisture. The predicate defines how it was measured, or the statement being made about it like, was measured at 10 a.m. using sensor X, or is predicted to increase. And the description provides all the surrounding metadata, the context, the units sometimes, the constraints, the source of the information, the provenance.
So by formalizing just those three aspects.
By formalizing those, ODIM ensures that when you combine data from different sources or different models within KLA, the system can understand the context, the origins, and therefore the reliability and comparability of that integrated information. It prevents you from mixing apples and oranges unknowingly.
And this also highlights the pragmatic design choices you mentioned. They deliberately left things out.
Right. ODIM is a perfect example of intelligent omission. Its main focus is social and environmental modeling, where understanding the relationships and the provenance of observations is often more critical than, say, having incredibly deep formal semantics for every possible unit of measure. So they chose to omit complex unit semantics because it wasn't essential for their primary goals.
So core ontologies are about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. They aim for that practical balance, fundamental enough to integrate related areas, but tailored enough to be directly useful for specific, complex tasks without getting bogged down in universal philosophical debates or features they don't immediately need. Utility and fitness for purpose are key. Hashtag 2.3 strategic considerations for ontology choice.
So if you're leading a project, you've got these options: domain, upper, core, hybrid. Making that choice sounds like a really big deal up front. It's not just technical, it seems like it shapes the whole project's potential.
It's arguably the most critical decision in the entire ontology engineering lifecycle. Get the scope wrong, and you either build something too narrow to integrate or too broad and abstract to be useful. You have to align the type of ontology with your ultimate goals.
So what factors drive that decision? First off, obviously the domain breadth.
Right. If you need extreme detail for a very specific problem, maybe classifying subtypes of leukemia,
Right.
you need a highly granular domain ontology. But if your goal is integrating, say, all the IT, HR, and operational systems across a global company, you absolutely need an upper ontology as a common foundation for that kind of breadth.
Okay, then there's the intended use. What are you actually going to do with it?
This determines the required level of logical formality. If the ontology is mostly for helping humans navigate information or just providing a controlled vocabulary, maybe a simpler structure, less logically rigorous is okay, like a thesaurus or a taxonomy.
But if you want the machine to reason with it,
Then you need the heavy artillery. If you expect automated reasoners to check consistency, derive new facts, make deductions based on the ontology's rules, the axioms, then you need a highly formal, logically sound structure. That usually means using a language like OWL, which is based on description logic, designed for exactly this kind of machine reasoning.
And that brings us to what you called the guiding star, defining the competency questions. This sounds absolutely crucial.
It is. This is the ultimate reality check, borrowed straight from classic ontology development 101 methodology. Before you model anything, you must write down, in plain natural language, the specific questions your finished ontology has to be able to answer correctly.
Give me an example.
Okay, maybe something like, list all pharmaceutical products manufactured in Facility B that contain active ingredient X and were approved by the FDA between 2020 and 2023. Or, which employees in the engineering department have completed the mandatory cybersecurity training in the last 12 months?
Ah, okay. Very specific questions.
Yes. The nature of these questions dictates everything. It tells you what classes you need, product, facility, ingredient, employee, training, what properties you need. Manufactured in, contains ingredient, approved by, works in, completed training, and what level of detail is required. For example, do you need exact dates or just the year?
So it forces you to be really focused on the outcome.
Absolutely. If your competency questions are about, I don't know, molecular interactions, you need a deep, specialized domain ontology. If they're about tracking assets across different countries and time zones, you probably need an upper ontology base that formally models space and time. It's always a strategic trade-off. Balancing the need for specificity to solve the immediate problem against the need for generality to allow for future reuse and integration. Skipping this step, that's how you end up building these huge, vague ontologies of everything that look impressive but can't actually answer any useful questions.
Okay, let's shift gears to the actual doing of it. Ontology engineering, or EO, it sounds quite grand and formal, doesn't it?
It does, like bridge building but with concepts. And it kind of is. But the literature, the experts, they consistently describe it as, well, really hard. It's complex, it takes a lot of time, and it's surprisingly easy to make subtle errors, even if you're an expert. The term that keeps coming up is cognitively costly.
Cognitively costly. I like that. It implies it takes serious brain power.
It really does. Think about what's involved. You need to be fluent in these formal logic languages, like OWL. You need sharp logical reasoning skills to avoid contradictions. You need a good grasp of language to handle the ambiguities in the source material or when talking to domain experts. And of course, you need deep knowledge of the actual domain you're modeling.
That sounds like a unicorn skill set. You need to be a logician, a linguist, a subject matter expert, and a coder all rolled into one.
That's exactly the challenge. And often, the hardest part is getting multiple domain experts who might use the same words slightly differently in their corners of the business to agree on one single formal definition for a concept like customer or project or risk.
I can imagine the meetings. Philosophical battles, you called them.
They can definitely feel that way because it's not just data entry. It's fundamentally an act of interpretation and formalization.
So, given it's so tough, are there guiding principles, like rules of thumb, to keep ontology engineers from going completely off the rails?
Yeah, there are a few key principles that are generally accepted. First, and maybe most importantly, there's no single correct way to model a domain.
Really?
Not one right answer.
Nope. Because an ontology is an abstraction, a model built for a purpose. The best solution is always pragmatic. It depends entirely on the specific application you're building and those competency questions we just talked about. What works for search might not work for deep reasoning.
Okay, that takes some pressure off maybe. What else?
Second, ego is inherently iterative. You just have to accept that. You'll design something, build it, test it, get feedback, find flaws, and refine it. You will almost never get it perfect on the first pass. It's a cycle.
Design, evaluate, refine, repeat. Exactly. And third, the concepts you define should ideally reflect things in the real world. Your classes and properties should map closely to the actual objects and relationships out there in the domain often. They correspond pretty directly to the nouns and verbs people use when they talk about that domain.
Why is that important?
It helps keep the ontology grounded, makes it more intuitive and understandable for humans to work with and maintain over time. It prevents it from becoming this purely abstract, disconnected, logical structure that only a machine could love. Hashtag tag 3.2, the essential cycle of ontology development.
Okay, so it's iterative, pragmatic, grounded. How does that translate into a practical workflow? Is there a standard process or life cycle for building one?
There is a generally accepted sequence of steps, remembering that you'll likely cycle through them. Step 1, absolutely foundational. Determine domain and scope. Nail down the purpose, the boundaries, and crucially, write down those competency questions
We keep coming back to those questions.
because they drive everything. Then immediately, step 2, consider reusing existing ontologies. Seriously, before you write a single line of OWL, look around. Is there a standard upper ontology you can build on? Is there already a good domain ontology for your field or part of it?
Why is reuse so critical?
2 big reasons.
Mm.
It saves an enormous amount of time and effort, obviously, but more importantly, it promotes interoperability. If everyone starts adopting and extending the same foundational ontologies, it makes connecting systems and sharing data way easier down the road. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't absolutely have to.
Okay, so define scope, look for existing stuff, then what?
Then you start gathering your raw materials. Step 3. Enumerate important terms. Just brainstorm and list all the relevant nouns, verbs, concepts, terms that people use in that domain. Get it all down.
Like a big vocabulary list?
Sort of. Then, step 4, you start structuring it. Define classes and the class hierarchy. You take those terms and start grouping them into meaningful classes, concepts, and arranging them in that ISI hierarchy we discussed. You might do this top-down, starting general and getting specific, or bottom-up, grouping specific examples first, or often a mix of both.
Okay, now we have the basic structure. What about the connections and details?
That's the next couple of steps where the real formal logic comes in. Step 5, define properties, or sometimes called slots. This is where you identify the attributes that describe your classes, like has color, and the relationships that connect them, like is part of employees. Remember, inheritance helps here define properties at the highest relevant class.
Got it. And step 6.
Step 6, define property facets or restrictions. This is getting into the nitty-gritty logic. For each property, you define constraints, like its value type. Is it a number or string, another class?
Yeah.
Its cardinality, how many values can it have? Exactly 1, 0 or more, at least 1. And its domain and range. What class does this property apply to, and what class must its value belong to?
So really locking down the rules for each property?
Exactly. This ensures the logical consistency and enables powerful reasoning later. Then finally, step 7. Create individuals, or instantiate the classes. You start populating your structure with actual concrete examples, specific people, specific products, specific events. This turns the abstract ontology blueprint into a populated, usable knowledge graph.
And the process stops there. Build it and you're done.
Absolutely not. That's a crucial point, especially now. We had to emphasize the ongoing maintenance phase. Domains change, right? Especially fast-moving ones like AI or medicine. New concepts emerge, old ones become obsolete. And ontology isn't a static document, it's a living artifact.
Like the AIO ontology you mentioned earlier.
Perfect example. The team behind the artificial intelligence ontology explicitly built in processes for dynamic updating and rigorous maintenance because the field of AI itself changes so incredibly fast. If your ontology doesn't evolve with the domain, it quickly becomes useless or even misleading. Hashtag 3.3 standard tools and languages.
Okay, for listeners who might encounter this field, maybe work with engineers doing this, what are the key technologies, the standard languages, the main tools they'd be using?
Right, the toolkit. The absolute standard language for building serious ontologies is the Web Ontology Language, or OWL. It's a W3C recommendation, the global standard, and it's based on a family of formal logics called description logics.
OWL, got it. And it uses something called RDF underneath.
Often, yes. OWL ontologies are typically written down, or serialized, using the Resource Description Framework, RDF format. RDF is the underlying data model for the semantic web, representing information as those subject-predicate-object triples we talked about. OWL provides the richer vocabulary and logical rules on top of the basic RDF structure.
You mentioned description logic as the basis for OWL. Why that specific kind of logic? What's special about it?
That's a really good technical point. Description logics are a subset of formal logic, but they're specifically designed for representing knowledge about concepts, roles, properties, and individuals. The key thing about most description logics used in OWL is that they are decidable.
Decidable,
Meaning that for any logical question you ask the ontology, like is class A necessarily a subclass of class B, or is this ontology consistent, there's an algorithm that is guaranteed to finish and give you a definite yes or no answer in a finite amount of time.
So the computer won't get stuck in an infinite loop trying to figure something out.
Exactly. This decidability is crucial for automated reasoners, the software tools that check consistency and infer new knowledge from the ontology. It guarantees they will actually work reliably. More general logics are often more expressive but aren't decidable, which would make automated reasoning impractical.
Okay, that makes sense. So out OLRDF for building it. How do you actually query the data once it's in a knowledge graph structured by an ontology?
The standard query language there is ASPARQL. Think of it as SQL, but for graph data, RDF triples, instead of relational tables. SPARQL lets you ask complex questions, navigate the relationships defined in the ontology, and pull out specific information from the KG.
And what about actually building the ontology? Are people coding AWL by hand?
Sometimes, but usually not for large projects. The most dominant tool by far is Protege. It's an open-source graphical editor developed at Stanford. It provides a user interface to create and manage the classes, properties, individuals, and axioms without having to write raw OWLRDF code, though you can view it. It's the go-to editor for most people in the field.
Okay, Protege for editing. What if you're a programmer building an application that uses an ontology?
Then you typically use libraries or frameworks. For Java developers, Apache Jana is a major one. For Python, RDFLib is very popular. These provide APIs to load, manipulate, query, and reason over RDF data and OWL ontologies within your software.
And reflecting the trends we're discussing, are there newer tools emerging that integrate more modern AI techniques?
Definitely. A good example is the Ontology Access Kit, or OAK. It's interesting because it's designed to work with multiple backends, not just traditional triple stores, but also other formats like OBO, used in biology, OWL files directly, even SUCLI. And crucially, it explicitly includes functionalities designed to interface with large language models.
So tools are already being built for that hybrid future.
Precisely. OAK is a sign that the practical toolkit for ontology work is evolving to become more programmable, more flexible, and directly embracing AI assistance. Hashtag tag tag 3.4, the LLM revolution in EO, 2022-2025 trend.
Okay, let's dive into that integration because this feels like the biggest shakeup in ontology engineering right now, large language models. Given how cognitively costly and slow manual EO is, LLMs seem like they could be a massive accelerator, maybe even democratize it.
The potential is definitely seen as revolutionary, yeah. The research coming out, especially in the 2024, early 2025 timeframe, is showing pretty clearly that LLMs can generate surprisingly decent first drafts of OWL ontologies directly from natural language inputs.
Like feeding it project requirements or domain descriptions.
Exactly. Give it user stories, technical documents, maybe even transcripts of interviews with domain experts, along with those competency questions. And it can generate an initial set of classes, properties, hierarchies, sometimes even basic axioms.
How good are these drafts?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Some recent studies were really interesting. They suggest that certain LLMs, especially when they're carefully prompted or maybe even fine-tuned on ontology-specific data, can actually outperform novice human ontology engineers on certain initial modeling tasks, particularly getting that first broad structure down.
Wow, outperform novices.
Yeah.
But hang on. Ontologies are all about formal logic, precision, truth, consistency. LLMs are notorious for hallucinations, right? Making stuff up confidently. Isn't using an LLM to build a structure that's supposed to be a bedrock of logical truth fundamentally risky? Aren't you just baking potential errors right into the foundation?
That is the central tension. You've hit the nail on the head. It's the major risk everyone is grappling with, and why you absolutely cannot just take the raw output from an LM like GPT-4 and treat it as a finished ontology. It just doesn't work.
So what are the problems?
You see variable quality. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's nonsense. You see common logical errors, inconsistencies, incorrect property definitions, and just general flakiness. So robust validation by a human expert is still absolutely non-negotiable.
But if validation is still needed, where's the real benefit? And how are people mitigating these risks?
The benefit is speed for the initial draft, getting maybe 70–80% of the way there much faster. The mitigation is coming from smarter interaction with the LLMs. Engineers aren't just asking for raw output anymore. They're using sophisticated prompting techniques.
Like what? You mentioned chain of thought or metacognitive prompting. Can you explain those quickly?
Sure. Chain of thought SUTI prompting is basically asking the LLM to show its work. You instruct it to explain its reasoning step by step as it generates the ontology structure. Why did it make car a subclass of vehicle? Why did it choose this specific property restriction? This forces the LM into a more structured, logical generation process, and the resulting explanation helps the human expert spot flaws in its reasoning much faster.
Okay, so it makes the process more transparent. What about metacognitive prompting?
Metacognitive prompting, MP, goes a step further. You actually instruct the LLM to critique its own output. For instance, after it generates some axioms, you might prompt it. Now, review the axioms you just created. Are there any potential logical contradictions? Do they accurately reflect the domain constraints described earlier? Refine them if necessary. You're essentially asking the LLM to perform a self-correction cycle based on the principles of good ontology design.
Interesting. So the LLM becomes more of a partner or maybe an assistant that needs careful supervision.
Exactly. The human expert's role shifts dramatically. They're less of a manual bricklayer and more of an architect, a curator, a quality controller, and a very sophisticated prompt engineer. They guide the LLM, they design the prompts, maybe create specialized data sets to fine-tune the LLM specifically on description logic principles, and then they perform that crucial final validation, ensuring logical soundness and domain accuracy.
So the future isn't fully automated, EO, it's this hybrid workflow.
Undeniably, it has to be. You leverage the AI for speed, for scale, for handling the sheer volume of information. But you absolutely retain human expertise for the critical thinking, the logical rigor, and the final sign-off on quality. The efficiency boost is real, but the need for expert oversight isn't going away. Hashtag 3.5, the importance of FAIR principles.
Right. And speaking of quality and best practices, we need to touch on the FAIR principles. Findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. We usually hear about FAIR for data, but the sources say they're now a standard for the ontologies themselves.
Absolutely. The community realized that ontologies are incredibly valuable knowledge artifacts in their own right
Yep.
and often very expensive to produce. So applying FAIR principles makes total sense to maximize their impact and, frankly, justify the investment.
How do they apply specifically to ontologies?
Well, findable means making sure the ontology is published somewhere stable, with clear metadata so others can discover it. Accessible means using standard protocols so people and machines can actually retrieve it. But interoperable, I, and reusable R, are especially critical for EO.
Interoperable. That connects back to using standards like OWL.
Precisely. Using standard languages like OWL and RDF, maybe aligning with a common upper ontology, is fundamental for interoperability. It ensures your ontology can talk to other systems, can be merged or mapped to other ontologies without needing completely custom one-off translation code every time.
And reusable ties into not reinventing the wheel.
Exactly. Designing your ontology with modularity, with clear documentation, maybe publishing it with an open license. All this encourages reusability. It means an engineer working on a related problem can take your ontology or parts of it and build upon it, saving them time and promoting consistency across the field. Look at Odobateum again. It was explicitly designed with modularity and reuse in mind. A fair ontology is just exponentially more valuable to the community than one locked away in a proprietary format or designed without considering integration. It fosters collaboration instead of creating yet another knowledge silo.
Okay, let's pivot now to where these ontologies are really making a difference today, solving some of the big challenges in AI, especially in this 2022-2025 timeframe. One huge area is explainable AI, XAI. It feels like everyone wants AI they can actually understand and trust.
And ontologies are pretty much indispensable for achieving meaningful XAI. The core problem with many powerful AI models, especially deep learning, is their opacity, the black box issue. They make predictions, but it's incredibly hard to understand why.
Right, you just get an answer, no reasoning.
Exactly. Ontologies provide the missing piece, the explicit, structured, logical model of the domain. This structure can be used to interpret the model's behavior. You can map the opaque features the AI learned back to the clear concepts and relationships defined in the ontology.
How does that help explain things?
It provides a shared language, a common conceptual ground between the AI and the human user. It allows the system to generate explanations in terms the user understands, referencing the defined classes and rules. It helps translate the complex statistical patterns into statements like, the loan was flagged as high risk because the applicant's debt-to-income ratio property exceeds the threshold defined in the risk assessment policy axiom. It provides that crucial link back to explicit knowledge, making the AI auditable and therefore more trustworthy.
And let's loop back to the LLM synergy again. We said ontologies provide guardrails for LLMs, helping with the hallucination problem. Can you elaborate on that? How does it work in practice?
The idea is to use the ontology and the knowledge graph built from it as the structured, verified factual memory for the LLM.
So the LLM consults the KG before speaking.
Kind of. When the LLM is generating text, especially in response to a query that requires factual information, you can design the system so that it first queries the KG, using the ontology structure via SparkQL, to retrieve relevant, verified facts. These facts then constrain or guide the LLM's generation process.
Ah, so it's not just generating text based on its training data's statistical patterns. It's actively incorporating real-time verified facts from the KG.
Precisely. It grounds the LLM's output in structured, reliable knowledge. This can significantly reduce the likelihood of factual errors or hallucinations because the generation is anchored to the ontologies defined entities and relationships. It's a way to combine the fluency of LLMs with the factual rigor of symbolic knowledge representation. This is seen as a key path towards building generative AI systems that are safe and reliable enough for critical tasks. Think medical summaries, legal document analysis, financial reporting.
We mentioned the AIO briefly before, the ontology about AI. It seems like a perfect case study for this era, an ontology trying to map a domain that's evolving incredibly quickly.
It really is. The artificial intelligence and ontology, detailed in that April 2024 paper, is a serious attempt to formally systematize the concepts, the methods, the tools of AI itself. Its main goal is to give researchers, developers, policymakers a common, unambiguous language to talk about AI.
Which is sorely needed given how fuzzy the terminology can
Oh,
be.
absolutely. Is a transformer the same thing here as it is there? What exactly constitutes machine learning versus deep learning? The AIO aims to provide clear, formal definitions for all these core concepts: layers, networks, functions, loss functions, datasets, LLMs themselves.
But what's really striking about the AIO structure is that it explicitly includes ethical and societal dimensions, right alongside the technical stuff.
That's its most forward-looking feature, I think. It's organized into 6 main branches. You have the expected technical ones: networks, layers, functions, LLMs, data preprocessing. But critically, there's a top-level branch dedicated entirely to bias.
Bias as a formal class in the ontology.
Yes. It's not just mentioned in the documentation. Concepts related to fairness, accountability, transparency, different types of bias, like data bias, algorithmic bias, are formally defined as classes and properties within the ontology structure itself.
What's the significance of formalizing bias like that?
It means you can potentially use the ontology to reason about the ethical implications of AI systems in a structured way.
Mm.
You could, for instance, annotate an AI model description in the KG with links to specific bias types defined in the AIO. It forces developers and researchers to consider these aspects as integral parts of the AI system, not just as external concerns. It makes ethical considerations a formal part of the system description.
And its development process also reflected this modern hybrid approach.
Yeah, it did. The paper mentions using a combination of careful human curation by AI experts and leveraging LLMs to help suggest terms and relationships, especially given the sheer speed at which new AI concepts emerge. Then, rigorous expert validation ensured the final quality. So the AIO is both an ontology for AI and an ontology built with the help of modern AI techniques. A very meta, very 2024 kind of project. Hashtag tag 4.3 sectoral applications, domain-specific impact.
Okay, so beyond the world of AI research itself, where else are ontologies making a big practical impact across different industries? You mentioned health earlier. That seems like a massive area.
Huge and incredibly critical. The complexity of medical knowledge is just immense. Ontologies are fundamental for managing that. Think about diagnosis support systems, electronic health records, drug discovery, clinical trial management.
What are some key examples?
Well, standardized medical ontologies like a SNUMD CT, that's the systematized nomenclature of medicine. Clinical terms, it's enormous, covering hundreds of thousands of concepts for symptoms, diagnoses, procedures, body parts. And the Unified Medical Language System, UMLS, integrates SNUMD with many other health vocabularies. These provide that essential common language so that a diagnosis recorded in one hospital system can be understood correctly by another system or by a researcher analyzing data globally. Without them, large-scale healthcare analytics and data sharing would just be impossible due to semantic inconsistencies.
We're also seeing uptake in industries that maybe seem less obvious, like construction.
Yes, that's been a growing area, largely driven by the rise of building information modeling, or BIM. BIM models contain vast amounts of complex, structured data about buildings.
So ontologies help manage that BIM data.
Exactly. They're used for better information management across the project lifecycle. For example, in safety management, there are ontologies like the Safety and Health Exchange, SHE model, used to formally represent potential hazards, safety regulations, and required controls during the design and construction phases. They're also being used to analyze complex building codes automatically for compliance, or to manage information about construction rework, linking problems back to design choices or material specifications. Essentially, they turn the complex BIM data into a queryable knowledge graph.
And predictably, finance must be a big user too, given the need for precision and regulation.
Absolutely. Finance relies heavily on categorization and rules. Ontologies are applied for things like sophisticated risk categorization, defining different types of market risk, credit risk, operational risk, and how they interrelate. And very significantly in fraud detection, where complex patterns involving multiple entities and transactions need to be identified based on predefined rules and relationships. Also, in RegTech, regulatory technology translating complex legal regulations into formal ontological rules that automated systems can use to check for compliance is a major application. Hashtag 4.4 semantic information retrieval. Search beyond keywords.
If systems like Google Search are using KGs underpinned by ontologies, then improving search itself information retrieval must be a core use case, moving beyond just matching keywords.
It's one of the original and still one of those powerful applications. Traditional keyword search is fundamentally limited, right? It just matches character strings.
Yeah.
It doesn't understand if your search for Jaguar means the car, the animal, or the old operating system.
Right, the ambiguity problem again.
Exactly. Ontologies enable truly semantic search by providing that structured understanding of concepts and their relationships. They let the search engine grasp the meaning behind the words, both in the user's query and in the documents being searched.
How does it work technically? What are the key methods?
Two main techniques stand out. First is query expansion.
Expanding the user's search terms.
Yes, automatically and intelligently. If you search for, say, hybrid car, the system uses the ontology, which knows that hybrid car is a type of car and might be related to concepts like fuel efficiency or specific models like Prius. It can then automatically add these related terms, synonyms, parent classes, child classes, related concepts to your original query behind the scenes.
So you find documents that use slightly different terminology but are still relevant?
Precisely. It overcomes the vocabulary mismatch problem. The second key technique is semantic annotation.
Annotating the documents themselves.
Right. Instead of just indexing documents based on the words they contain, you index them with richer metadata that links specific mentions in the text directly to concepts in the ontology. So, a news article might be annotated not just with the word Apple, but with a link to the specific individual, Apple Inc., the company, defined in your ontology.
Ah, so the index knows which Apple is being discussed.
Exactly. This allows for searching based on meaning and context, not just keywords. You could search for companies involved in AI research and find documents annotated with specific company individuals that are linked via the ontology to the CLANCH. Artificial intelligence research. This is incredibly powerful for complex document collections, think intelligence analysis, scientific literature, patent databases, or even image retrieval, where tagging images with ontological concepts provides much richer search capabilities than simple captions. Hashtag 4.5 data management and integration.
And maybe the biggest enterprise challenge ontologies tackle is that classic problem, data silos. Every department has its own systems, own databases, own spreadsheets, none of which talk to each other easily.
Ontologies are consistently pitched as the semantic glue needed to solve this exact problem. It's all about achieving interoperability. When data is locked away in heterogeneous sources, legacy databases, different vendor applications, cloud services, spreadsheets, they all use different schemas, different terminology. It's chaos.
So the ontology provides a common language.
Exactly. You create a unified ontology that provides a common conceptual model and vocabulary for the entire domain of interest, say customer management or supply chain. Then you map the disparate schemas of your underlying data sources, your CRM database, your ERP system, your warehouse logs, to this central ontology.
So you're not moving the data, just mapping it.
In many modern approaches, yes.
Yeah.
You create a unified view on top. Suddenly you can query across all those previously siloed systems as if they were one single, cohesive, logical repository. You get that holistic view of your business operations that was impossible before.
But mapping sounds complex, and creating a massive unified KG from all that data sounds like a huge, expensive project in itself. Is there a more efficient way?
Yes, and this is where the virtual knowledge graph, VKG architecture, comes in. It's a really clever and increasingly popular approach, specifically designed to avoid the pain of large-scale data migration and duplication.
Virtual.
Yeah.
So the KG doesn't actually physically exist in one place.
Correct. Instead of physically copying and transforming all the data from your source systems into a new centralized graph database, the VKG approach keeps the data where it is, in the original databases, often relational databases. The ontology provides the unified conceptual model on top, and you create mappings that link the ontology concepts and properties to the relevant tables and columns in the underlying source databases.
So how do you query it if the data isn't actually in a graph?
That's the magic. You write your query using Spartial against the ontology. Special middleware tools like OnTop or the commercial OnTopic Studio are key players. Here intercepts that SparkQL query. It uses the mappings you define to automatically translate the SPARQL query into equivalent queries in the native language of the source databases, which is usually SQL for relational databases.
Wow, real-time translation from Sparkle to SQL.
Exactly. It sends the SQL queries to the source databases, gets the results back, and then reconstructs the answer in the graph format expected by the original SPARQL query. The end user interacts only with the unified ontology view, completely unaware of the complex translation happening underneath.
That sounds incredibly powerful, but also computationally demanding. Does it require specific kinds of ontologies to work efficiently?
It absolutely does. This VKG architecture relies heavily on using a specific optimized profile of LL called LL2QL.
QL query language.
Right. LL2QL is intentionally less expressive than full OL. It restricts some of the more complex logical constructors you can use in your ontology, but there's a very good reason for this trade-off. Precisely. LL2QL is mathematically designed to guarantee that any SPARQL query asked against an ontology written in this profile can be efficiently and completely rewritten into SQL queries. That guarantee of efficient translation is what makes the VKG approach feasible and performant in practice, even when querying massive enterprise databases. You sacrifice some expressive power in the ontology logic, but you gain significantly in query performance and scalability for data integration. It's a pragmatic choice for large-scale data access.
Okay, so ontologies offer huge benefits: explainability, data integration, better search, grounding LLMs. But if they're so great, why isn't everything running on ontologies already? What are the hurdles, the obstacles that still slow down wider adoption?
Despite all the progress, especially with tool support and methodology, some fundamental challenges persist. The big one remains the sheer complexity and time commitment required for high-quality ontology engineering.
Still that cognitively costly problem.
It's still there. Even with LM Assistant speeding up the first draft, the careful refinement, the validation, ensuring logical consistency, getting domain expert consensus, that all takes significant time and requires specialized, often scarce expertise. It's still fundamentally slower and more expensive upfront than just, say, throwing data at a standard machine learning model.
And the LLM integration, while exciting, adds its own layer of challenges, doesn't it?
It does. We've touched on them. The risks associated with LLM quality, the variability, the potential for subtle errors, the need for really sophisticated evaluation methods to properly check the logical and semantic quality of the generated output. Plus, there are potential issues around data privacy or data leakage if you're using cloud-based LLMs to process sensitive internal documents to build your ontology.
Right. And what about dealing with just the sheer scale of modern data? Big data, data lakes.
That's another major hurdle. Applying semantic technologies effectively in big data or data lake environments requires a significant initial investment in creating those mappings, developing the ontology, cleaning the data. It's also genuinely hard to assess the quality of semantic models when they're generated automatically or semi-automatically at massive scale. And we probably need better tools, more abstraction layers, to make these technologies usable by data analysts or business users who aren't necessarily OWL or description logic experts.
So it feels like we're constantly facing this fundamental tension, the scalability trade-off.
That really is the central dilemma, isn't it? You have high-quality, meticulous, manual ontology engineering. On one side, it guarantees precision, logical consistency, reliability, but it's slow, expensive, and hard to scale.
And on the other side,
On the other side, you have automated methods, increasingly involving LLMs. They offer speed, they offer scale, they can process vast amounts of text, but they come with risks: lower quality, potential inconsistencies, the hallucination problem, the need for heady validation.
so the only realistic path forward is.
It has to be that strategic hybrid approach. We need to get smarter about combining the strengths of both. Use automation and AI for the heavy lifting, the initial scaffolding, the pattern discovery, but always retain that critical human oversight, the expert validation, the domain knowledge injection to ensure the final result is logically found, accurate, and truly fit for purpose. Sacrificing logical integrity for speed is a false economy when building foundational knowledge structures.
Okay, challenges acknowledged. But the overall feeling, especially looking at the 2022-2025 developments, is still one of massive opportunity, largely driven by this coevolution, this synergy between ontologies and LLMs.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting reciprocal relationship that's unfolding. It works both ways.
How so?
Well, first, LLMs assist ontology engineering. As we've discussed, they promise significant efficiency gains. They lower the barrier to entry, potentially making EO accessible to more people, maybe skilled analysts who aren't deep logicians. They can handle the tedious parts, freeing up experts for the high-level design and validation.
Right, LLMs making EO faster and maybe easier. What's the other direction?
This might be even more impactful long-term. Ontologies improve LLMs. They provide the structure, the verifiable facts, the reasoning capabilities that LLMs inherently lack. They offer the grounding needed to make the outputs of next-generation generative AI more accurate, more contextually relevant, less prone to hallucination, and ultimately more trustworthy.
So ontologies act as the brain or memory that gives the fluent mouth of the LLM something reliable to talk about.
That's a great way to put it. This points towards a convergence, a moving beyond the old debates in AI, the symbolic AI, like ontologies, versus the subsymbolic AI, like neural networks and LLMs argument.
It's not either anymore.
Exactly. The future vision emerging is one where the most powerful and reliable AI systems will rely on a much tighter synergistic integration of both. Symbolic approaches providing the explicit knowledge, the logic, the reasoning. Subsymbolic approaches providing the pattern recognition, the learning from data, the fluent generation.
A hybrid intelligence.
Precisely. Systems that can learn robustly like neural nets, but also reason precisely and explain themselves clearly based on structured knowledge like ontologies. That combination promises AI that is both highly capable and demonstrably reliable and interpretable. Hashtag 5.3, the relevance of community and standardization.
One final point that seems crucial, especially for something as complex and foundational as ontologies, the non-technical stuff. Collaboration, community, standards. These aren't just nice-to-haves, are they?
Oh, they're absolutely essential for progress, scalability, and long-term impact. Building comprehensive, high-quality ontologies is often too large a task for any single organization or research group.
So collaboration is key.
Definitely. Initiatives like making the AIO ontology open source encourage contributions, peer review, shared maintenance, and faster evolution. Building a community around an ontology increases its adoption and ensures it stays relevant.
And adherence to standards. We keep mentioning OWL, RDF, FAIR.
Sticking to established standards like OWL and RDF, using common vocabularies where possible, following FAIR principles. This is non-negotiable if you want your ontology to be useful beyond your own immediate project. Standardization is what enables interoperability, reusability, and the ability to link knowledge across different domains and systems. It's what allows the development of shared tools and infrastructure. Without community and standards, we just end up with thousands of disconnected, incompatible knowledge silos, repeating the same problems ontologies were meant to solve in the first place. They are crucial for turning individual efforts into a cumulative, global, semantic web of knowledge. Hashtag tag outro.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I think the core message, the main takeaway is pretty clear. Ontologies aren't just some obscure academic exercise. They are the formal, logical underpinning that lets machines graduate from just processing strings of data to actually comprehending context and meaning.
Understanding the what's and the why.
Exactly. They're not really optional anymore. If you're serious about building AI systems that are reliable, that are accountable, that whole push for XAI, and especially for building the next wave of generative AI that needs to be grounded in facts, which is so critical in this 2022-2025 period.
Yeah, thinking out this structure, this formalization of knowledge, it even pushes us into some interesting philosophical territory, beyond just the code. As we design these ontologies, we're essentially drawing the map of what a machine can understand about a domain.
Defining its world.
Precisely. And there's emerging work, like that CHI 25 paper mentioned in the sources, using concepts from ontology theory ideas like pluralism, how different views are represented, or groundedness, how concepts connect to reality to perform design criticism on AI systems, including LLMs. The idea is that the structure of the knowledge representation itself, the ontology, reveals the built-in assumptions, the potential biases, the inherent limitations of the AI that uses it.
Wow. So the blueprint doesn't just describe the domain, it also reviews the perspective, maybe even the limitations of the blueprint's creators.
It can, yes. Which leads us to a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider as you interact with AI more and more.
Okay, leave us with something to chew on.
If the way we choose to structure knowledge, the classes we create, the relationships we emphasize, the things we perhaps implicitly or explicitly leave out when we engineer an ontology. If that structure fundamentally shapes the understanding, the capabilities, and maybe even the ethical boundaries of the AI built on top of it, What does that imply about our responsibility in designing these knowledge blueprints? And maybe, how should we as users or citizens start thinking about demanding more transparency, not just about the AI's code or data, but about the underlying ontological choices that define its very conception of the world?